In 1979, at Tel Fekeriye, just south of the Turkish-Syrian border, a great statue came to light. It is now in the Museum of Damascus and dates back to the 9th century BC, when it was erected by a certain Hadad Izi, a Syrian governor of Gozan for the Assyrians, king of Gozan for the Aramaeans, in honor of the god Hadad, Lord of the water in the heavens and on the earth, that brings richness, creates pastures, and irrigates all the land. On the tunic is a long inscription in the Assyrian dialect of Akkadian and in Aramaic. The Akkadian text is inscribed in the place of honor, the front, while the Aramaic text is relegated to the back. Hadad the storm god was one of the most important divinities worshipped by the Aramaeans. He is sometimes depicted brandishing thunderbolts, as on this stele in the Louvre in Paris. Hadad Izi of Gozan was not the only Aramaean king to have left a relic that has come down to us intact. In the Museum of Aleppo, at the foot of a likeness of the god Melkart, an inscription attests to it being the statue that Bar-Hadad, king of Aram, erected out of gratitude to Melkart, his lord, who answered his prayer. A longer inscription, also at the Louvre, was inscribed by Zakir, the king of Hamath, in thanks for a victory over 16 other Aramaean kings. The god who gave him that victory was Baal Shamayin, Baal, the lord of the heavens, who could be the same god as Hadad. The longest of the ancient Aramaic inscriptions preserved in the National Museum of Damascus is, however, a treatise between a certain Bargaya, perhaps a high official of the Assyrian king himself, and Mikhaiel, the king of the Aramaean city-state of Arpad. In the text, Bargaya lists a series of curses against Mikhaiel should the agreement ever be broken.
If Mikhaiel is dishonest in the dealings, let his kingdom become a kingdom of sand, a kingdom of dreams that dies like a flame. Let Hadad hurl his wrath and all sorts of disasters on the earth and in the heavens. Let him send hail unto Arpad. Let the locusts go mad for 7 years. Let not a blade of grass grow, that one can see neither vegetation nor green pastures. Let not the sound of a lyre be heard in Arpad or among its inhabitants, but only moans of desperation, crying, and lamentations.
Aside from the inscriptions, there exists other proof of these Aramaean city-states, such as the stone sculptures unearthed at Gozan Tal Halaf, on view in the Museum of Aleppo. The delicately sculpted ivories from Hadatu Arslan Tash in the Museum of Aleppo and the Louvre. Fresco fragments from the mid-8th century, also in Aleppo. The frontispiece of the Temple of Hadad in the National Museum of Damascus. The Aramaean city-states, whether independently or as a group, engaged in recurrent conflicts not only with the Assyrians but also with the Israelites. Like the Assyrians, the Israelites were defeated several times by the Aramaeans, who in turn were several times defeated by them. Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Israel, Jordan, and Egypt are the countries that still today preserve the memory of the ancient Aramaean civilization, often only in place names. First and foremost, the Aram Naharaim, the Aram of the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, the Mesopotamia of today, the cradle of the Aramaeans. Then Padan Aram, the field or highway of Aram. Arpad, Bit Adini, Amku, Nisibin, Edessa, the valley of Orontes, the valley of the Al-Biqa, Koba Bet Rehot, the valley of the Litani, Hamath, Sam al-Ghozan, Damascus, the sites in which the Aramaeans played a key role from the 11th to the 8th century BC. In an endless succession of wars among themselves and against outside enemies. Then, in 732 BC, the Aramaeans were finally defeated by the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III. Damascus was destroyed. Its last king, Ratson II, was killed, and the territory was broken up into provinces that were annexed by Assyria.
Damascus will cease to be a city. It will become a collection of ruins. Its neighborhoods will be abandoned forever and will become grazing land.
I will set fire to the walls of Damascus, and it will devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad.
And the people of Aram will become slaves.
Thus, the biblical prophecies came true. From that moment onward, the dispersion of the Aramaeans began. Without a land of their own, they were condemned to wander over the course of time to the 4 quarters of the world. Nevertheless, in their own way, the Aramaeans actually conquered the world, not with arms and the might of their nation, but with a far more effective instrument, their language, that has survived through the centuries and has come down to us in the liturgy of the Syrian Orthodox Church and the other Syriac churches. The inscription on the famous 9th century BC statue of Hadad is the oldest surviving document of the Aramaic language, and evidence that in around 1000 BC, the Aramaeans adopted the Phoenician alphabet, composed of 22 letters. They used it without adding as much as 1 character, even though the phonetic system of the Aramaic language was much richer than Phoenician. Long before conquering the Aramaean city-states, the Assyrians realized that it was much faster and more practical to write in Aramaic rather than Akkadian, the accepted language of the day. Akkadian contained an unwieldy number of characters compared to the 22 letters of the Phoenician Aramaic alphabet. In addition, Aramaic could be written with ink on skins or on papyrus, while the cuneiform Akkadian required a stylus which impressed the wedge-shaped characters onto soft clay tablets. Because of its simplicity and rapidity, Aramaic soon became an international language used in official documents, in diplomatic reports, and in commercial transactions. In the 2nd book of Kings, the ministers of King Hezekiah, in order to avoid being understood by the people, ask the emissary of the king of Assyria, "Please speak to us in the Aramaic tongue, so that only we can understand you." 100 years later, a Philistine king wrote in Aramaic to the Pharaoh of Egypt, asking for military help to stem the advance of the Babylonian army. Paradoxically, after 732 BC, the year of the defeat of the last Aramaean kingdom, the language of the defeated people became a universal language. Easier to write than Akkadian, and with instruments that were easier to come by, it was a kind of shorthand compared to the complicated Akkadian that remained a language for scribes and scholars, while Aramaic became a popular language used by all social classes. Thus, in due course, Aramaic